And my books are also available via Amazon. So, and thank
Fantastic.
you, Allison, for that wonderful introduction. Um, and thank you for coming, Rose and Lori and
I love
whoever
your, I mean,
else.
apart from being your friend, I love your work.
Uh,
So, you know,
Thank you. All right. So this is a combination of work that's in my new book manuscript, which I haven't really shopped around. I sent it to Sheila and also to Diane Lockwood. So we'll see what happens. With my earlier books, I made the mistake of like submitting to 8 different presses, and then it was snapped up. Both of them were snapped up right away. And I found myself out, $250 in reading fees. So now I'm taking a slower approach. So, and Rose has heard some of these before because we're actually in a writing group together. So this is entitled Magic 8 Ball. At the back of the thrift store, in the peripheral vision of my right eye, a clerk is dusting off a magic 8 ball. With every swish, 2 years erase from this mid-20th century oracle. Then a sudden squall of mental wind sweeps me back to 1972 and Los Angeles, couched in Jules' living room, her parents at their beach house. Sister Linda in matching black panties and bra stands and cools at the open fridge door. She asks, "Is there any pie left? I could eat a horse." Her blood sugar has bottomed out, an after effect of the 3 bowls of Michoacan we've just finished smoking. Jules brings out her magic 8 ball, our Pythia of Delphi, with its score of answers varying from reply hazy, without a doubt, to simply no. It's our go-to when befuddled and baked, and I am befuddled on whether to transfer to Berkeley and leave Jules, my first love, behind. I query, shake the oracle, then turn it over only to find a definitive no. Facing the girls, I say, the last time I used the 8 ball, it told me not to go to college. And like a clap of thunder from a cloudless sky, I transport back to the thrift store, Athens, Georgia, and the fact that I earned tenure 34 years ago. So I mean, there's hardly any of us here. I'm just gonna keep reading. If you have questions, shout out or do something, get my attention
Absolutely.
somehow. Yeah, we
And
can.
if you want to take any time in between to talk about context or introduce anything, that's totally fine. I usually leave that up to the poet, Gary. So just at your pleasure.
I'm like a straight through reader,
Awesome.
but I like to leave it open to the audience because sometimes, if you're reading for 20 minutes, people forget their questions and stuff. So you can unmute and say, "Hey, Gary." So this is called Guy in a Thin Blue Parka Doing Tai Chi in the last available parking spot in the restaurant lot. I get it. Cape Cod, and you want the ocean to lick your face, not like a dog, but as a new baby gumming your cheek, because this is the heart's least cluttered promise. It is early April, wind offshore, temperature 39 Fahrenheit. The beach nestles just over the lot retaining wall, mottled with seaweed, water scrub pebbles, and white sand. If you squint, it turns into a variegated 80s den carpet, the ones patterned to hide dirt. Tai Chi is beyond me. I know only that it exhales flexibility and tranquility, but this guy issues a pointedly bovine grunt every time his arms rise above his shoulders, hands clasped in some sort of prayer pose. Oddly, it seems like enraged Tai Chi, as if strong wants and moving limbs could somehow blend karmically, flooding his corporeal chi with endorphins. We've circled the parking lot 3 times to no avail, and here on the Cape, parking, as well as other things, are at a premium. Hunger plays an out-of-sync kettle drum in 3 different digestive tracts as we edge the Subaru into this last space, thinking, surely someone so mindful will grasp what is happening. We couldn't be more wrong. Waiting and watching, we discuss modes of communication, all the while trying to avoid being judge and jury while he jerkily repeats several rounds of poses, everyone ending in prayer. Finally, Rob lowers the window and quietly yells, "We'd like to park in this spot." The guy peers back at us as if we were the last 3 passenger pigeons in the Massachusetts of 1894. Then moves to the right and resumes prayer pose in front of the adjacent car. It is warm in the restaurant as we inhale the chunky perfume of fresh chowder. This is called Daedalus and Icarus. Rose, I think you've heard all these before. Daedalus and Icarus. There was a crenulated line from Minos of Crete to the Minotaur, product of illicit love between Minos's wife, Pasiphae, and Poseidon's unsacrificed gift, the snow white bull. Well, it occurred long ago, different times, different customs, and Poseidon did enchant Pasiphae, which makes me wonder if even queens had free will then, let alone commoners. And that adjectival phrase, Snow White, which brings to mind another tale of enchantment with multiple males, some of dubious character. But let us return to Minos of Crete, whose bride was, as they say, stepping out. And I'm going to skip over a few minor details, but Minos asks Daedalus to build a labyrinth. No, it was to be the labyrinth, unescapable by Pasiphae's son, the half-bull, half-man, and anyone else. From what I hear, Daedalus was barely able to escape himself. And for this wonder of construction, Minos imprisoned not only Daedalus, but also his boy Icarus. Well, the rest is common knowledge. Icarus disobeys and pays, going down in flames, as we say these days, even though it actually was going down in melted wax and loose feathers, which may lead you to ask whether any of this is to be believed. But fables may instruct, even if inaccurate. So when you promise a god something, make sure you follow through. Y'all don't have to clap. This is,
Even if we're enjoying it?
yeah, I don't know. I'm actually a shy person at heart, you know.
Well, we'll clap silently then.
Okay.
You don't have to even notice. If you don't look up, you won't notice.
This is entitled Lewdness, so we're kind of shifting gears here. I'm considering how things classify either as lewd or not lewd. Such a chewy word, a mouthful headlining tongue, lips, and jaws, a playful nip from incisors. And colors. Pink is lewd, coral is lewd, as are rose and raspberry. But fuchsia and magenta, no. They bellow in a fake oh kind of way. Are you finished yet? Just too much, overdone, like a cut of Wagyu cooked well rather than rare. Lewdness is color that pants rapidly or oscillates without volition, the wet whisper of wind over teeth as breath draws in and is pushed out, mirroring tidal flows, subtle but hot, and odors, musk, lewd, dried breast milk, unlewd, 6-day-old sheets, lewd, toasted bread, unlewd. Food for thought as my fingers slowly walk the beaded steps of your spine. And this is a poem that actually was published in Delta Poetry Review earlier this year. I tried to pick a variety of poems just to show how, goddamn diverse I actually am as a poet. So this is called Alfalfa Hay. The fields in Farmington, Georgia are checkerboards. Each red square hosts a 5-foot cylinder of green alfalfa hay. December fodder for hoofed 4-foots. Evenly spaced, a single bale sets sail every 20 feet, as if a 16th century armada of vegetal frigates had sprung fully formed from the thick red clay. The panorama is an unnatural natural, like male sage grouse strutting feathers on a mating lek, or Kinshi's equidistant terracotta warriors unearthed by Lingtong farmers. The soothing nature of regularly spaced objects. May my eyes continue to see what is and what may be. And so this next one is called My Personal Relationship with the Avocado, History and Evolution. Avocado, alligator pear, avocado pear, avocados. Birthed in Mesoamerica, they come from both outcrossing and self-joy. Avocados are relics from an evolutionary antique mall. No natural dispersers left to spread their seeds. Avocados should never be chosen with a stem attached. The best retain an open wound. Avocados were the first veggie fruit I hated, with an intensity that only a kid can have for food. Avocado's texture was the problem. Sad green eggs that refused to slide by my tongue or taste buds. I still hate eggs. Avocado testing began at 12. Perhaps puberty's new morph flavored them like new ice cream. Avocados now confound me with their ripening. Like the Immaculate Conception, it is faith, not science. Avocados rest in our ash fruit bowl, plotting their 2-hour and 47-minute window of perfect ripeness. Avocados, like life itself, a moment's distraction may flip the world upside down. And this is a poem. Most of those poems are unpublished. This poem will be in issue 25 of McQueen's Quarterly or Quinterly. Oh, good thing Claire's not here. This is titled White Oak. Headed south on Georgia 15, on my way to Greensboro and the lake, when the sun pours a pillar of March light and crowns a white oak centered in a green speckled field. Stately and gray caped, height and belly fat say at least 300 winters, but I cannot place the plants sprouting in that field. I'm early for my meeting in this mixed-use town of gentrified gewgaw shops and counter-service meat-and-three cafes. First stop is Reese's Hardware, here since the 30s. I need nails and a short-handled hammer. The clerk's face is furrowed like those rolled Piedmont fields. I greet, "Hey, how you doing today?" His reply, "Every day above ground is a good day." Our conversation moseys down the unpaved road of country life. I saw a beautiful old oak in a field west side of Eatonton Highway, about 5 miles back, the one with the big white mailbox. Happen to know what that new crop is? He replies, "This time of year, most folks are planting alfalfa hay, and that tree, that's the one we used to call the hanging oak." Kind of a gut punch ending there. I had a lot of trouble getting that poem published, and I'm not sure why, but Claire said maybe it's because it was such a heavy ending. So But I always thought that's what poems were supposed to do, right? This is another poem that's going to be in issue 24, which is the next one. And it's titled A Backflip of Language. Daughter number 2, toddling at 23 months. Strawberry blonde ringlets, a remake of Shirley Temple. Cornflower blue eyes and lucid skin. A still drying portrait turning heads of strangers in the vegetable aisle. Visiting her Uncle Harold, her ears flip a somersault. His name somehow transforms into Uncle Horrible. Maybe he shouldn't have done his mad dog growl used for frat boy initiations and jokes scaring his own small sons. Decades later, he fondly remains Uncle Horrible, a nickname sticky as bubblegum on a Macon sidewalk in July. A spot, but not a stain. And this is called Nothing Lasts. The night of Mom's death, I wondered how souls vacate closed eyelids, and which of her thoughts were lasting alabaster. I mean, there's always another pizza after my wife eats the last slice, even if I have to pick up the phone. Do we still say pick up the phone, or is it just, where's my cell, blurted to a now empty room, the last person gone? And what about the last remaining Luxardo cherry in the jar, original maraschino, though they have no stems, so you can't manage that bar trick for closing time, the one of tying a knot in the stem using only your tongue, a flex showing your talents as potential lover, if only for one last hour on one last night. And will your last call amour be the last person you'll entice into the ebon shingled atria of your heart? When you take them, will it be your last flat, this current home? Or will both lover and house slide into the last chapter of your manuscript of life? Was it Schrodinger who said everyone is both first and last, as well as someone in between? This next poem is another unpublished one, and it's titled Softness. My mother passed down guilt and the work ethic, heirlooms that serve through crisis and calm. When my wife and I met, our pockets held nothing but fingers. It's the thought that counts. To her, I passed down t-shirts, well-worn, gentle as nightingale's feathers, repurposed as nightgowns, winter and summer. Then 2 girls knocked on her womb's door, popped out, and 4.7 years later inherited my tees. Shirts climbing the stairs of one more generation, now floor length over 5-year-old twig legs. Are these cotton shirts still safe harbor for my cells and progeny's genes? Can they serve as shield and armor, though threadbare, soft as tulle? I watch as the oldest sucks the pliable neck ring into her mouth in the universal need to suckle. Can she taste my imprinted residue, the day-long stories of my life? How can such softness hold the granite blocks of love? So this poem was written in response to an interaction with someone in this Zoom. It is entitled Frog Shrouded. Frog Shrouded. Is that what she actually said? Frog Shrouded? Poetic for sure, but what is the necessary specificity? Medium-sized leopard frogs or large bullfrogs? Maybe tiny gray tree frogs, a blockade crawling upwards with hexagonal mucus-celled toes like small wind-up toys. My hearing? Well, at 70 things do go awry. I'm sure of what she said. but her mic echoed and her voice at 82 is soft. Later, I laughed. Of course, she said fog shrouded. And I know I have your age wrong, so forgive me. Anyway, Rose, that's going to be in Panoply. So this is titled Underwater. And it's the last one I printed out, so we might take a little pause if you want to hear more, and I'll print some more out. Underwater. I lasted a week at the first foster home. There I learned only to inhale because a completed breath brought the unknown. Days to come were milk poured into water, cloudy and without taste. I was underwater. The second home taught me to hold my breath. The blue backyard plastic pool where in June my bully foster brothers played octopus, binding arms and legs while pushing my head underwater. Number 3 included parents who never left the couch or TV. Obesity, cockroaches, and a baby boy with soiled diapers. No AC and the thick August air felt like breathing underwater. Even a crazy mom beats this. So I returned home for a year, then at 17 moved out. Mom left LA for Tecate, Mexico, and died 8 months later when her car vaulted an embankment and ended up underwater. Somber note. Do you want to hear more poems?
Yes.
Okay. Give
But
me
I
a
was
minute.
wondering, Gary, can you tell us a little bit more about that last one? Because that one got me in the gut and I'm still kind of reeling.
Yeah, so I did live in 3 foster homes. My mother did die in a car accident,
Oh
but
my God.
not underwater. She went over an embankment and broke her neck. So most of all our work, I'm sure, there's a true story behind it, whether partial or complete. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's so hard to write those kinds of poems, but it's so important to do it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I do it, but I've written enough of them so that I'm kind of thinking, it's kind of a cheap is the wrong word, but I feel like it's an easy gut punch, right? Like it's, I don't know, I'm not communicating this very well, but I kind of feel like saying, you're over it, so why write about it? But I think it is, it's important to write about stuff like that. So
And it might be a lifeline for somebody else who's gone
yeah,
through something similar. I
yeah,
think that's the only thing that I think of when I'm writing, and I'd love for other people to jump in. When you're talking about trauma, you don't write it just to exercise it from yourself or get some distance. You write it because you're trying to tell other people that they're not alone and that
yeah.
somebody else has had a similar experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's super important.
I did my life stuff, which is you got my age right, wrong. I'm 86.
I know. I was being
but-
nice, Rose.
You flatterer gets you flattery gets you everywhere. I wrote about my experiences from my point of view now, looking back, and I admit I didn't write it for anybody else but myself to try to put my ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking back, suddenly I think you become more objective.
Mm-hmm.
And for my children, because they never really asked about these things. So I thought if one day I kick the famous bucket, I have the books, and if they want to, they can read about it all.
Yeah.
They know a little bit more about their mom.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a really good point. I haven't shared a lot of the poems that I've written about my own trauma stuff with my children because they're too young and I don't want to
Yeah.
put that on them. But maybe someday, you know.
Mine weren't, yeah, they were too young at one point when they actually lived with me through it.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to know, because it's like me saying now today in these times, I don't want to watch the news because I'm getting too depressed. I
Yeah.
can't bear it. I know it all, so I don't want to watch the dead in Gaza. I don't want to watch the dead in Ukraine. I don't want to watch hungry children and kids blown up, and I don't want to watch more of Trump. And I don't want to,
Yeah.
it's all just getting too much. And in Latin America, it's not any better. So like this, my children, I think, protected themselves
Yeah.
from their worst feelings and depression and sadnesses.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I live so far away, we never had these conversations.
Yeah.
So,
I was just thinking, Gary, going back to your own experience, I have met quite a few people who've been through the foster care system, and it's just nightmarish, some of the stories that people share. And I hope and believe that things are getting better. I want to believe that, but I also think it's really important for people who have been through hell to know it wasn't just me, and it wasn't because of me that it was bad. It's just bad in a lot of situations. Oh, you're muted, my friend. Still muted. And I know, Lori, you've been in many places of the world having to look at the results of
Yes.
trauma and
Yes.
helping people process trauma.
Yeah,
And
I was going, yeah. Go ahead.
and this is, of course, part of my problem. I lived through the Second World War. Even though I was very small, I didn't really understand it all, but the trauma is there.
Yeah.
And I have been often afraid of looking too closely. And that is also why when I see now what happens in Gaza, what happens in Ukraine, I just can't deal with it. It's yeah, it's too much.
It is too much, but I think the job of the poet is to deal with it. I think that's part
yeah,
of it. The job of the poet is to leave something behind that people can empathize with, can relate to. And, I've been extremely fortunate not to have a terrible life. I've had a pretty good life, but I've worked with people who don't have good lives. So as a poet, I try to tell their story as best I can, to put it in a
Yeah.
perspective for other people
Oh,
to understand.
I totally agree, and I've done that. I have a whole chapbook on my childhood during the war, told from a child's point of view. And I have revisited certain situations in World War II when I was a kid. Absolutely, I totally agree. We have to tell it, but I find it impossible to deal with it now in the new versions of the same story.
I hear you. I mean, I hear both sides. I think it's okay to take a break when you need to and
Yeah.
say, my spirit just cannot take more,
That's-
Yeah.
But then we come back to poetry, and somehow, for me, when I read it in poetry, it allows me to get closer in a way that isn't quite so devastating. I mean, it is devastating in that moment, but because poetry allows me to live inside someone else's experience for a while in a very concentrated way. And for me, that sort of transfer of understanding, it just keeps me connected with humanity in a way that feels really
Yes.
precious.
Yeah.
very well said. Very well said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And there's this saying that says poetry will save us. I remember posting that on Facebook once. I found a meme, poetry will save us. And I truly believe that. I truly believe that and I often say a poem a day keeps the doctor away. And if that doesn't work, try chocolate. But you know, that is the base.
Or both
of-
chocolate
Yeah.
and poetry
Yeah. Together.
And coffee. We have to
and
have coffee.
coffee. Yes. Gary,
Well-
did we chat long enough to give you time?
Yeah, I guess I've got 5 or 6 more, and by
Yay.
the way, I totally agree with you, Allison, about the importance of you know, for lack of a better word, modeling and letting people know that one can survive trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote my memoir, which is a complete story of my life for my kids who are adults. I don't know that they've read it, but it's there when they want to read it.
Yeah.
But also for kids from trauma backgrounds to know that, you know, they too can be successful. They can be scientists or whatever they want to be. And you know, it's important. I guess I lots of times feel funny talking like about the poem you asked because I don't know. I mean, I've had a very successful life. And I was able to overcome the trauma. I mean, if as much as one ever overcomes it, and it feels a little funny to me to kind of talk about it, other than to say, yes, frankly, it was horrible, and I've written all about it, and you know, I guess I have a little bit of survivor's guilt or something.
Mm.
You know, having gotten through it when so many people don't get through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
have a
but I kept
question,
thinking that you're maybe giving a lifeline to somebody who's in it right now. Like they might pick up something, read that poem and say, it is possible to go through hell
Yeah,
and then emerge and have this very rewarding and
right,
rich life full of love, which you have. And I
right.
think so many people need to know that it is
Yes.
possible. Sometimes the belief is the thing that makes you keep going, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't mind writing them. I just don't like to talk about
I have one question though, Gary,
Sure.
because I found that because when my war happened, I was a kid. I mean, I was so little, I didn't really understand half of what was going on. And apart from the trauma, which happened without me knowing, really, I had so many joys as a child, which kind of later I could reconnect it to. And I lived like a young dog. My mother had to look after us and sew and make some money. My dad was far away. We had to survive. So I was outside. And you know, I looked at the caterpillars and the beetles, and I was with my friends,
Yeah.
and there were little goats, and there was this. Do you have these moments where you just have the joy of a child coming back to you?
Yeah. So my mother, I mean, to give you a little background, up until I was 9, my mother was a single mom. I mean, she was married to my dad, and he was the one that impregnated her. But he had a lot of mental problems, and they divorced. They separated when my mom was still pregnant. So my mom returned to Rochester, New York, where her parents were. And so I grew up in adjoining apartments and a big house where it was me and my mother who always worked, and I came home to my grandmother. And my grandfather was the only father image I had. And so that happened, that went on like that until I was 9. So my childhood was more or less like yours in the sense that to me, it appeared perfectly normal.
Mhm.
Aside from the occasional friend's parent who, you know, whispered, he comes from a broken home when I came over to play. Then we moved to California, and my mom started having mental problems. And so the first time I was in a foster home was when I was 12. And I was, I was well formed. I mean, I've always been a strong-willed person and had a strong personality or a well-developed personality. And I was in a foster home for about 5 months. Well, actually, the first one, they took me to a foster home and I enrolled in school, and then the people kicked me out for some reason. And so I spent about, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks at this place, and I thought everything was fine. And then I went in the second one. The third one was when I was between my junior and senior year in high school. And so I'm sorry, I've skipped ahead of myself. So the reason I was in the second foster home was my mother either had a bad drug reaction or she tried to commit suicide. I'm still not really sure no one's really sure of what actually happened. And she spent 6 months in a mental hospital. So then she came out of the mental hospital, and she was never the same after that. I mean, she didn't have electroshock therapy or anything, but she just was never the same. And she was diagnosed as being bipolar, and so she kind of had good years and bad years. And I, very young, had to turn into an adult, right? Somebody who took care of myself, because she wasn't really capable of doing it. And then she tried to commit suicide again, clearly a suicide attempt, when I was in 9th grade. And I found her both times. The second time she was laying in diarrhea and shit and vomit, and but I knew her psychiatrist's number, so I called her psychiatrist, and he came over. And by that time, she was pretty much mentally unaffected by whatever pills she had taken. And so, we had this rational discussion in which she promised not to try this again. So things went on pretty well for about another year and a half. And then in between my junior and senior year in high school, she just became impossible. And so I went in. We agreed I would go into another foster home, and that was the one with the cockroaches and the dog shit and the babies with unchanged diapers and people that were massively overweight and ordering pies every day from in California at that time. There were these things called the Helms bread trucks, and it was the Helms Bakery. And they had these trucks that went around the neighborhood, and you could buy bread or pastries or whatever. So every day they would buy a couple pies every day and eat them. Anyway, after a month, I just said, crazy mom is better than this. And I went back home, and we kind of led separate lives. I moved out when I was 17. I started working when I was 15, and I didn't pay rent or she ended up on Social Security disability. So that was how she supported us. I didn't pay rent or food, but I paid everything else. And she died when I was 18. So, it's a sad story. What can I say?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, wow, what strength you had. How did you make your way through college? I mean, at
Yeah, I mean,
18,
you've managed to, like, you have a career, you were a professor. How did you do that?
how did you do
Well,
that?
I mean, times were different then. And first of all, I had no money, and there was a lot of federal student aid.
Right.
So I was work study all through undergraduate, and the tuition in California was minimal.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, I paid $212 a year to go to Berkeley.
Wow.
But
And
how did you know, excuse me, but how did you know how to do this? Because
Yeah.
I'm like, without a parent, how does a kid know how to navigate college. I mean, I remember when my son was, going to college, I was such a helicopter mom. He could have never done it by himself with the applications. And how did you know how to do all that? That's
Well,
amazing.
yeah, well, again, I think things are different. I mean, and I raised two kids, and one of them is a veterinarian, and the other has a master's degree and will probably go on for a PhD. And yeah, we were helicopter parents, and we helped them fill out their forms. I think it was just a lot less complicated.
Yes, that's
Um,
true. Yeah.
I,
But I also
I,
think it sounds like you had just this fighting spirit. You were not going to allow what had happened to you to define your future. I get this sense that you were just so determined
yeah, well, I knew
because you
what
had
I
to grow up
wanted to
so fast.
do, and that helped a lot.
That's true.
And I started out, I mean, all of our parents, including Rose's, their college experience was totally different. I mean, there were depression kids, and if you went to college at all, you lived at home and you went to the college down the street,
That's what I did. Yeah.
and that's how I started out.
My dad went to Brooklyn College.
Yeah, and I went
Yeah.
to Baruch. I didn't get into Brooklyn.
Yeah.
It was hard
Well,
to get into.
living in New York City, you were lucky because you had a lot of good colleges just down the
Absolutely.
street.
Absolutely.
The
They even
college that I
give you
started
advice.
at, was quite mediocre. And after a couple of years, there were two things. I wanted to get out of LA because LA has always been a town where if you didn't have a lot of money, you were just a second-class citizen.
Still is. Yeah.
And secondly, I just I wanted to go to a better school than I was going to. So I mean, I was savvy, right? So the people who had the lowest priority for transfer to UC schools were people who were already at four-year schools. So what I did was I found the one major that Berkeley had that nobody else had. And when I did my transfer, I said, I want to be a social welfare major, and you're the only campus that has it. So please let me in. And I got in. So yeah, I knew how to work the angles, I guess, I mean, I have always been a survivor. So and frankly, I was blessed with good intelligence. So but I think that it is a lot more complicated, but I think that um, we've also, I mean, we've worked hard so our kids wouldn't have to struggle, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I think, well, well, they're not as strong as they really could be because they haven't had any struggling. Um, and so I don't know. I don't, it's an irony of life, right?
That is absolutely, I wrestle with that all the time. Like, you know, I have a 15-year-old who's hasn't not there yet, but he does just fine in college, but I'm not sure he could make himself dinner. We need to work on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, let me assure you, if he goes hungry, he'll figure out how to make.
yes, he will figure it out. I would love to hear you read if you have a few
Okay,
more that,
sure. I have.
this has been really special though, Gary. I really appreciate being able to talk like this. This is not all that normal that we can actually just have this kind of
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah.
And I value it. And it was really, thank you for the gift of telling us about what you went through. I think, you know, most poets, we don't get to have that kind of stepping behind the curtain and understanding what has shaped someone and their work. And I
Yeah.
think it's really valuable.
Well, thank you. Uh, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm honest about my life. There's no point being otherwise, although I suppose a lot of people might have issues that lead them to not want to,
Mhm.
talk about a lot of things like abuse victims and stuff. But I was/am a success story, and so I do feel like I can be an example in sharing
Yeah.
what made me successful. So
Have you ever shared your work with foster care kids? Like actually
I
talked
never
about your
have.
life?
Yeah, I never have, and I I uh I haven't been very involved in that kind of social activity. I mean, my career was as an ecologist, and I always said, well, I'm saving the goddamn earth for everybody, and you don't have to do everything.
Yeah.
Um, and now, frankly, I'm tired. I want to write my poems and
Yeah,
enjoy my next, few years. And
Totally, I agree.
you've
yeah,
earned that for sure. I was just
yeah,
curious. There's absolutely no
No pressure,
obligation.
no pressure to do any
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right. So this next poem is called Cohabitation. Moths, unnerving as loose power lines sparking the drip-filled August air with high voltage. It is their randomness that frightens, erratically bouncing right to left, up to down, northeast to southwest. I miss strike after strike of these small powdery UFOs, as if they had ESP or echolocation. I've lived years with these carpet and clothing moths, Trichophaga, Tinea, and Tineola, gnawers of suits and carpets, sharing stitches like the anti-seamstress. I won't bomb the house, so we coexist. Latvia and Russia, as I rocket off the couch while watching Jimmy Kimmel, challenged to predict the spins and barrel rolls of this latest Lepidopteran dogfighter. My weapon, hand or blue plastic swatter. Sometimes the rush of success. Then I lick talc-dusted fingers to erase the chalky corpse from an ecru living room wall. Next morning, I open my t-shirt drawer, only to unveil two tiny holes in my Athfest 2015 shirt. The one perfectly aged, sweet as a baby's bum, and I reckon that moth-human interactions are eternal as sunrise in the east, an unwinnable war against survivors of the age of insects, unless I'm willing to invoke the nuclear option. But the holes are small, and few will notice. This is called History Lesson, Athens, Georgia. I'm running down Antebellum Row. Doric columned Greek houses all painted with the city's last stash of 1849 white zinc pigment. It's the straight stretch of Millage Avenue, named like 6 other streets after 1802 Governor John, who left heights, terrace, extension, circle, court, and place in our midst, confounding tourists trapped for days at a single intersection. 7:37 a.m., July 10th, and by mile 3, the soupy air has coated my tongue with the taste of young water oak leaves, trees that have lined our streets for a century and now die one by one from the male attribute of heart rot, fungal infidelity. My friend Bill, town arborist, says water oaks spend their first 50 years growing and their last 50 dying, but I'm unsure how this maps onto the human storyline. At mile 4, I run over a manhole cover dated 1916, Cobham Ironworks, and stoop to pick up the blue and white surgical mask caught on the lettering. Third one this run, because history is written by both the standing and the lost. And this is titled Just Fallen Leaves. Running at 70 years, not tire rotations. My eyes roam for tripping points on this ice-frosted Thanksgiving day. I'm looking down, not up, because last night's hard freeze has robbed the local maples of their color swatches, a geometric collage topping a frosted concrete canvas, chrome yellow, crimson, and honey amber. Now a damp remembrance, the fluttering hands of July's sun. Hands that caressed the wind's thighs one last time, and now lay exhausted on their bed of cement. This is titled IRL, which, if you're not familiar with NetSpeak, means in real life. I walk up to her while she's hefting a Bosque pear, a blushing yellow orb from the produce display at the Pig. Tammy? It's Gary Grossman. And her arms open, a newly petaled lily enfolding me like a plunge in Johnson's spring on a mid-July day. A shiver climbs the beaded string of my spine because we've not met in real life, and I'm mildly uncertain about the hug, tight or loose. The pandemic etched our friendship on virtual life, VL, rather than RL. Yet I know her as one knows Jo March or Veronica Mars. Her hug was air conditioning on a 90-degree afternoon. A prayer of heart and skin at a time when gray overpainted every color on my palette. But honesty fits any garment, regardless of size or material. And this is the last poem. I mean, I could print some more, but
Well, this is perfect though. It's 6 o'clock, so the last poem is
okay.
perfect. You have great timing, Gary.
This is entitled Missing. For 3 weeks, all chores have been mine. Barb, in residence at the toe of San Francisco Bay, now stepping her remaining sister through chemo and radiation. Pulling sweaty flannel sheets off our bed, I see her ghost indentation. 42 years of outstretched arms and legs, a faint K. Shopping and dinner prep both, and I'm too tired to cook. Foresight to buy a tray of rolled sushi, even though the rice is geriatric, a sell-by bargain. Watering and harvesting our winter bounty, lettuce, kale, scallions, carrots, turnips, and greens. Wash, rinse, and serve. My eyes drift as I wonder which of us will fit the solitaire setting. Well, thank you. You've been a wonderful, my best audience ever.
Oh, it's been such a joy, and I just really appreciated that we could have a conversation and really
Yeah,
dig into
yeah.
like, why do we even do this? Why do we take the time to put
Yeah.
words out into the world? I'm so grateful that you took the time to prepare and share today with us, Gary. And I noticed that you did put your information into the chat earlier, but if there's a particular place that you'd prefer, some poets really don't want us to buy their work anywhere but a specific place.
I don't, I mean, if you go to Amazon and you have Amazon Prime, you won't have to pay postage.
Right.
If you want to buy from me, I'll inscribe the book. So that will be, something to consider.
Yeah, that
Well,
would
I
be.
have a major problem in Peru because I don't know what they're doing, because now the last time I wanted to buy a book, they said they couldn't send it to Peru because the customs conditions had changed or something stupid
Oh.
like that. And then very often when I did buy it from Amazon before, and they send it with DHL, then DHL wants an extra bit of
It's
money.
expensive, yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they won't give you the last time it happened, I got my author copy, and I basically did a rude gesture, and I said they could keep the book because
At 86, Rose?
oh, I'm the older you get, the worse it gets.
Well, it was great to get to know you, Allison, and Lori, better. And
Better, yes, better, yeah.
so do whatever's easiest for you. I will say, I really like publishing with Inspired because they do print on demand via Amazon. And so anywhere there's Amazon, unfortunately, Peru, Amazon is messed up, but
I don't know
my
what it is.
first, and you'll pay local shipping rather than have to pay shipping from
But
the
I might
US.
ask you, and then you just stick it in an envelope, and without much ado, it might just
I
arrive.
could do
don't
that,
know.
but it's gonna be $20. I mean, the
Yeah, that's
last
all
time,
right. Do you have PayPal?
I do have PayPal and
Well, then I
Venmo.
can pay you. That's no big deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Well,
And
I
Allison, you
yes.
would certainly like my memoir.
I was thinking
It's a
I should get it
graphic.
yeah, and I also thought that my husband might be interested in the life
Yeah,
in fish. Um,
well, it's the
good.
life of a scientist, and
Yeah,
to my knowledge, at least in English, it's the only graphic memoir of a scientist. So
yeah, yeah. I told him about it.
You can tell him that it's about to be reviewed in Bioscience.
Okay, I will.
So,
Thank you so much. And I know that most of you have been to Well-Versed Words before. I am here every month, and you're always, always welcome. I just do this as a service to my fellow poets. This
yeah.
is just a passion project for me. And next month, we are featuring Kathy Nelson. And she's a poet that she has a beautiful voice, and she is going to be reading from the Ledger. Let me make sure I get her name right. The Ledger of Mistakes, which is her most recent book. So it's always the second Sunday of the month, unless I get COVID, because that happened to me in July. But usually it's the second Sunday of the month, and you're always warmly welcomed, all of you.
I
Thank you.
try to come, and I want to say very quickly that I met a very good friend through Well-Versed Words, Nancy Murphy.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Yes, and she was reading, and I knew that she published with Gyroscope, and I just signed a contract. I had just signed a contract with Gyroscope, so I went to her reading. Then I contacted her, and she ironically lives in the same place that my son lives, in Sherman Oaks, California.
Oh,
So
God.
I actually we got together, we met, and now we're really good friends, and it was all through Well-Versed Words. So I just want you to know that, Allison.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
I just want you to know that, and it was it's been so nice, and we've taken a class online together, and we're just really good friends now, and it's through all of,
I
That's
didn't know that
lovely.
Gyroscope published books.
Oh yeah, they do. It's by women over 50, so you're not going to make it, unfortunately.
Well, I have submitted to them twice, but not, I get this isn't a good fit, but,
Yeah.
submit again.
The irony is, I mean, I love them, and I've been accepted to Gyroscope magazine, and then they did publish a chapbook of mine, and then the last 3 times I submitted poetry, they rejected me also. So go figure, what I mean?
That happens.
And I went to Sherman Oaks Elementary, by the way.
Oh, you're
Oh my
kidding.
goodness.
I am a
This is
graduate of
crazy.
Sherman Oaks Elementary.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Wow.
Oh, and Rosemary, I wanted to say before I forget, you said that I could invite you. You're just
Anytime.
welcome anytime. If you go on, are you on Facebook? You are, right? I've
Yes,
seen
yes,
you on.
yes.
Okay,
She's
so
a queen of Facebook.
yes. So Well-Versed Words is just search for Well-Versed Words. It's a page that always has the link on it. So if you follow Well-Versed Words, it should remind you when there's a
I do
reading
that. I
coming.
have to follow it. I have to
Okay.
make sure that I get the notices.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Take
gotta
care,
go.
everyone.
Gotta go.
This
Okay.
has been
Bye.
great.
This was lovely.
Thank you. Great poems, Gary. Really
Yes,
great.
thank you so much.
Lovely.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Alice.